The greatest story ever told might be the greatest story ever sold. What if I told you that Jesus Christ was never crucified? Yes, you heard it right. A proposition that might seem outlandish, shocking, even heretical to some. But what if there's more to the story than what we've been told? For centuries, the narrative has remained unchallenged. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, suffered and died on the cross for the sins of humanity, a tale of sacrifice and redemption that has shaped the course of history and forms the bedrock of Christian faith. But what if this story isn't as rock solid as we've been led to believe? What if the crucifixion, the cornerstone of Christianity, never happened? Now, I'm not here to shake your faith or stir up trouble, but I do want to introduce you to an alternative theory, an idea that has been around for centuries, yet has been largely overlooked. This theory proposes that Jesus of Nazareth was not crucified. In fact, he might not have died on the cross at all. A bold claim indeed, but one that is backed by various canonical and non-canonical scripture references, historical evidence, and more. Imagine, if you will, a world where the crucifixion was a fabrication, a world where Jesus Christ lived beyond the events of Good Friday, a world where the greatest story ever told needs a major rewrite. It's a thought that's as intriguing as it is controversial. And now it's time to question. It's time to dig deeper. It's time to explore the unexplored, to challenge the accepted, and to seek the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. Are you ready to question what you've always believed? Buckle up, we're about to dive in. The Bible, the cornerstone of Christian faith, paints a vivid picture of the crucifixion, but does it tell the whole truth? Let's start by examining the canonical scriptures, the accepted books of the Bible, as we explore the account of Jesus' death and resurrection. Let's pry open these pages and question everything we think we know. The crucifixion, as depicted in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, presents Jesus as the sacrificial lamb, the Son of God who willingly gave himself up for the sins of humanity. Yet the details surrounding this event are far from clear-cut. There are discrepancies, absences of explicit evidence, and questions that remain unanswered. Take, for example, Jesus' final moments on the cross. In Matthew chapter 27, verse 46, Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" A cry of despair, of abandonment. And here we stumble upon our first conundrum. If Jesus was God incarnate, as Christian doctrine asserts, would he question his own divine plan? Would he feel abandoned by himself? In the same vein, consider the resurrection. The gospel accounts of what happened on the third day after Jesus' alleged death differ significantly. In Matthew, an angel appears to Mary Magdalene and another woman, telling them of Jesus' resurrection. In Mark, it's a young man dressed in white. Luke mentions two men in dazzling clothes, while John speaks of Jesus himself appearing to Mary Magdalene. And let's not forget the curious case of the empty tomb. If Jesus was resurrected, why was his body not found in the tomb? Some argue that it was stolen. Others suggest that it was never there to begin with. To add to the confusion, the Gospel of John mentions that the burial cloths were left behind, neatly folded. Would a body snatcher take the time to fold the burial cloths? Even the crucifixion itself is shrouded in mystery. Crucifixion was a common form of execution in Roman times, yet there is no explicit historical record of Jesus' crucifixion outside the Gospels. And within the Gospels, there is no consensus on the exact nature of Jesus' death. Was he nailed to the cross, as is commonly depicted, or was he tied to it, as some scholars suggest? These questions, these discrepancies, they cast a shadow of doubt over the traditional narrative of Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. They prompt us to question the accepted truths and to seek alternative explanations. If Jesus was God, would he question his own plan, or was there something else at play? As we journey into the non-canonical scriptures in the next scene, we'll continue to challenge the accepted narrative and explore the possibility that Jesus Christ was never crucified. Beyond the Bible, there are scriptures and texts that tell a different tale. In this sea of texts, we find the Gospel of Judas, a non-canonical scripture that provides an alternate narrative of the events leading to Christ's crucifixion. This ancient document, written in Coptic script, was discovered in the 1970s and offers a perspective that diverges significantly from the traditional biblical narrative. The Gospel of Judas depicts Judas Iscariot not as a traitor, but as Jesus' confidant, the only disciple who truly understood his teachings. A startling revelation in this text is the suggestion that Jesus asked Judas to betray him. Yes, you heard that right. The Gospel of Judas implies that Jesus' betrayal was not a scheme hatched in the shadows, but a deliberate act orchestrated by Jesus himself. This throws a whole new light on Judas's role in the crucifixion, doesn't it? Instead of being the villain who sold Jesus out for 30 pieces of silver, Judas appears as the loyal disciple carrying out his master's wishes. Now let's delve a little deeper. The Gospel of Judas also suggests that Jesus wanted to shed his physical body to liberate the divine spark within him. If we consider this theory, it leads us to question the very nature of Jesus' crucifixion. Could it be that the crucifixion was not a death sentence, but a plan for spiritual liberation, a plan that Jesus himself had set into motion? But of course, the Gospel of Judas is not the only non-canonical text that sheds light on this theory. The second treatise of the great Seth, another Gnostic text, also carries a similar narrative. It suggests that Jesus was not the one crucified. Instead, it was Simon of Cyrene who was mistaken for Jesus and crucified in his stead. Can you imagine that? The man we've been led to believe suffered and died on the cross might not have been Jesus at all. The implications of this are profound, to say the least. Yet another text, the Acts of John, goes so far as to suggest that Jesus watched his own crucifixion from a distance. This document presents a theory that Jesus survived the crucifixion, a theory that is both captivating and controversial. These non-canonical scriptures challenge the traditional narrative of Jesus' crucifixion, offering alternative theories that are as fascinating as they are controversial. They invite us to question, to explore, and to seek our own truth. Could it be that Judas, the so-called traitor, was actually following Jesus' orders? Could it be that the crucifixion was not an act of martyrdom, but a deliberate plan for spiritual liberation? Could it be that the man on the cross was not Jesus, but Simon of Cyrene? Could it be that Jesus survived the crucifixion? These are questions that beg for answers, answers that might challenge everything we thought we knew. History, as we know, is written by the victors. But what if the history we know is skewed? One of the most fascinating artifacts tied to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ is the Shroud of Turin. It's a linen cloth bearing the image of a man who appears to have been physically traumatized in a manner consistent with crucifixion. Many believe this shroud to be the burial cloth of Jesus Christ. But there's a controversy here that can't be ignored. For centuries, the Shroud of Turin has been subjected to numerous scientific tests to determine its authenticity. The results, however, have been anything but conclusive. In the late 20th century, radiocarbon dating tests were performed on the shroud. The results suggested that the cloth was made between the 13th and 14th centuries, more than 1,000 years after the crucifixion of Jesus. This would suggest that the shroud is nothing more than a clever medieval forgery. But wait, there's more to this tale. Other scientists have criticized the radiocarbon dating tests, arguing that the sample used for testing was taken from a portion of the shroud that was repaired in the Middle Ages, thus skewing the results. These scientists argue that other evidence, such as the presence of pollen from plants unique to the Jerusalem area, suggests that the shroud could indeed be genuine. So we have a piece of cloth, believed by some to be the burial shroud of Jesus Christ, with scientific evidence both supporting and contradicting its authenticity. If it's a forgery, it's an incredibly sophisticated one. If it's authentic, it could be the most significant artifact in Christian history. But let's step back for a moment. Even if the Shroud of Turin were proven beyond a doubt to be the burial shroud of Jesus Christ, it still wouldn't conclusively prove that he was crucified. After all, the shroud shows an image of a man who appears to have been crucified, but appearances can be deceiving. There are numerous methods by which such an image could have been created, especially if we're dealing with a forgery. Moreover, the shroud doesn't tell us anything about what happened to the man after he was wrapped in it. It doesn't tell us whether he died or lived, whether he was resurrected or simply survived his ordeal. The Shroud of Turin is a fascinating artifact, no doubt about it. But when it comes to proving the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, it leaves us with more questions than answers. It's a piece of the puzzle, but it's far from the final piece. So where does this leave us? It leaves us questioning, wondering, and digging deeper. It leaves us acknowledging that history is often more complex and more mysterious than we might like to believe. The Shroud of Turin, a possible evidence of Jesus' crucifixion or a clever forgery? Only time and perhaps more evidence will tell. Jesus, a mortal man or a divine being, could he have survived the ordeal of crucifixion? Ponder on this thought for a moment. The crucifixion, a form of execution so brutal, so inhumane, that it was designed to cause maximum suffering before the inevitable embrace of death. Yet, history records instances where individuals have survived this torturous ordeal. Could Jesus, revered as a man of exceptional strength and will, have also survived? Let's delve into the scriptures and historical accounts to explore this theory. The Bible in the book of Acts chapter 5 tells us about the apostles who were flogged and ordered not to speak in the name of Jesus. Yet they left the Sanhedrin, rejoicing that they had been counted worthy of suffering disgrace for the name. They survived the brutal flogging, a form of punishment similar to crucifixion, and continued their mission. Could Jesus, with his extraordinary resilience, have endured the same? Historical accounts also speak of people surviving crucifixion. Josephus, a first-century Romano-Jewish scholar, recounts an incident where he found 3 of his friends crucified. He pleaded with Roman Emperor Titus, who ordered them to be taken down. One of them survived. If a regular man could survive the ordeal, why not Jesus, who was anything but ordinary? Another interesting point to consider is the time Jesus spent on the cross. The Gospel of Mark tells us that Jesus was crucified at the 3rd hour and that he breathed his last at the 9th hour. That's a total of 6 hours. Typically, death by crucifixion took much longer, sometimes days. Could it be possible that Jesus did not die but fell into a deep state of unconsciousness, mistaken for death? Then there's the matter of the spear wound. The Gospel of John tells us that a Roman soldier pierced Jesus' side with a spear, causing a sudden flow of blood and water. Some medical experts suggest this could indicate that Jesus was still alive at this point, as the flow of blood and water is consistent with the pericardial and pleural effusions, a condition that can occur when a person is in deep shock. Also, remember the account of Jesus' burial. He was laid in a tomb, and a massive stone was rolled in front of it. 3 days later, the tomb was found empty. Was it because he had resurrected? Or could it be that he had recovered, moved the stone, and left? These are all intriguing points to consider, aren't they? While there is a wealth of belief and faith built around the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, it's fascinating to explore different perspectives and possibilities. If others could survive the crucifixion, why not Jesus, a man of exceptional strength and will? If Jesus survived, what happened to him afterwards? The answers might surprise you. Let's step into the realm of the aftermath, where the echoes of the crucifixion fade into silence and a new narrative begins to take shape. Consider for a moment that Jesus, having survived the cross, had to disappear from the public eye. He would have needed to travel somewhere far from the land where he was supposedly crucified. But where could he have gone? Theories abound, and 2 are particularly intriguing: India and France. Let's start with India. There's a theory that Jesus might have traveled east, finding solace and refuge in the verdant valleys of Kashmir. Why Kashmir, you ask? Because it's home to the Rosabal Shrine, also known as the Tomb of Jesus. This tomb, a modest stone structure, is said to hold the mortal remains of a prophet named Yus Asaph, a name that some believe to be another title for Jesus. The locals reverently speak of Yus Asaph as a man of miracles who arrived from a foreign land, his teachings echoing the principles of love and compassion that Jesus himself preached. Now let's cross continents and head to Europe. Another theory proposes that Jesus might have traveled to France, specifically to the Languedoc region. Here he supposedly lived a quiet life in the village of Rennes-le-Château. The mystery of this village was popularized by the bestseller The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, which suggests that Jesus married Mary Magdalene and fathered a bloodline that survives to this day. The village church, dedicated to Mary Magdalene, is filled with cryptic symbols and hidden messages stoking the fire of this theory. Whether Jesus traveled to India or to France, these theories suggest a life lived far from the public eye, a life of peace and anonymity. They paint a picture of a man who escaped death, and chose to continue his teachings in secrecy, away from the prying eyes of the Roman Empire. These theories, while controversial, offer a different perspective on the narrative that has shaped 2 millennia of religious thought. As we delve deeper into these theories, we're faced with a tantalizing question. Could Jesus have lived a long life far from the land where he was supposedly crucified? The answer lies shrouded in mystery, buried under layers of history, faith, and speculation. But one thing is certain: the quest for the truth continues, and every new discovery only adds to the intrigue. In the end, whether you believe in the crucifixion or not, whether you subscribe to these theories or dismiss them as mere conjecture, the story of Jesus continues to captivate the world. It's a tale of faith and survival, of divine intervention and human resilience. It's a narrative that transcends time, defying the boundaries of belief and skepticism to resonate in the heart of humanity. Could Jesus have lived a long life far from the land where he was supposedly crucified? This question remains an enigma, a riddle wrapped in the shroud of history. A question that invites us to explore, to question, and to wonder. The crucifixion of Jesus Christ, a fact or a fabrication? The answer might not be as clear as we thought. Here we stand at the crossroads of history and faith, where we have dared to question the narrative of one of the most influential stories of our time. We've journeyed through canonical scriptures and delved into non-canonical ones. We've sifted through historical evidence and pondered over the theory of survival. And now we come to the final act of this exploration, where we attempt to draw a conclusion. Let's quickly recap our journey. We started with the bold proposition that Jesus Christ might not have been crucified. The canonical scriptures, the backbone of Christian faith, seem to suggest otherwise. Yet we have found verses that subtly hint at a different possibility. A possibility that perhaps the crucifixion was not a physical ordeal, but a spiritual one, a metaphorical interpretation rather than a literal one. Stepping away from the canonical, we ventured into the non-canonical scriptures, those ancient texts that didn't make it to the Bible. These writings, shrouded in mystery, told tales of a different fate for Jesus. They talked about a Jesus who survived, who lived on, spreading his teachings far beyond the confines of Jerusalem. Next, we delved into the historical evidence, or rather the lack of it. The crucifixion, an event of such magnitude, left behind surprisingly scarce historical records. This lack of evidence, while not a definitive proof, certainly adds another layer of intrigue to our proposition. Finally, we discussed the theory of survival, a theory that suggests Jesus might have survived the crucifixion, that he might have lived on, carrying his message of love, forgiveness, and compassion to distant lands. This theory, while controversial, cannot be dismissed outright. Now, what are the implications of this theory for Christianity? Would the faith crumble if the crucifixion was proven a myth? Or would it evolve, adapting to a new narrative? The truth is, the core of Christianity is not the crucifixion, but the teachings of Jesus. His message of love, forgiveness, and compassion transcends any historical event. It is this message that has survived millennia. It is this message that has touched billions of lives. And it is this message that will continue to guide humanity. So where does this leave us? Are we any closer to the truth? Perhaps not. Or perhaps we've just started to scratch the surface. The quest for truth is a long and arduous journey filled with doubts and revelations. It demands courage, the courage to question, the courage to seek, and the courage to accept. Whether you believe Jesus was crucified or not, one thing is clear: his teachings of love, forgiveness, and compassion remain universal.